We've talked about the potential shift among Hispanic voters.
Latino voters increasingly rejecting the Democratic Party and embracing the GOP.
How many of you voted for Trump?
I voted for Trump. But I also voted for Obama.
I can at least say with Latino voters, we've never tried as a party.
Question is it too late?
This is the first time you'll be voting for a Republican?
Yes.
Wow.
Anything that has been good for Latino immigrants has been under a Republican president.
And I'm talking about Democrat voters who are desperate for change.
Se está cambiando el Partido Republicano ahora.
Sí.
¿Y por qué?
Pues queremos un cambio.
The biggest misconception is Latinos supposed to be Democrat.
Nancy, come out and play!
I believe that President Trump won that election, and I do believe that voter fraud occurred.
¿Cuán presente está el Partido Demócrata aquí?
Pues le falta, yo creo que en todas partes.
Do not put God aside for no political party.
We love our Hispanics.
Hello, everyone. I'm Paula Ramos. We're 2 days away from the election. It's incredibly tight. Control of Congress will come down to key votes in key states. And that's why Latinos, America's largest minority with over 34 million eligible voters, have never been so powerful. How many of you identify as Latina or Hispanic?
I identify as Latina. I think all of us.
Yeah.
All of us here.
How many of you voted for Trump in 2020?
I'm not scared to say that I voted for Trump.
But I also voted for Obama.
Me too.
But, you know, it's...
Yeah. In 2021, Eulalia Jimenez became the president of Moms for Liberty Miami chapter.
Children are being segregated.
She goes to school board meetings to protest COVID restrictions and the handling of hot-button issues like race and identity.
My name is Lali. I am the Moms for Liberty Miami-Dade chapter chair. The array of topics that we could discuss today is large, but I trust that there's more parents present and those topics are going to be discussed as we further along. So I'd like to take the opportunity to blast our page, Moms for Liberty Miami. We're here to serve parents, inform parents, empower parents. Your children are not safe in the school system.
Excuse me, ma'am, but we not address the board about school-related issues. This is not going to be a platform to advocate for any political organization. It's not going to happen. So you can articulate.
It's not a political organization. It's an organization to give parents information. Yes, because actually.
Several times a month, Eulalia meets with her local chapter of moms. And what kids learn about LGBTQ issues in school is at the top of their agenda.
If a child, middle school, high school, whatever, has a sexual inclination, that is accepted and welcomed, and we will maneuver that as needed with parental involvement, the teachers, the counselors. It's a team effort. Yeah. However, there does not need to be this agenda pushed on a little kindergartner that is just going to school to play.
Let me go to Ali Velshi in Naples, where some of the most dramatic pictures so far have been coming from with that storm surge occurring around those condominiums behind us. Ali?
Yeah, let me tell you, I want to, Randy, be careful as you do it this time because the wind has really picked up. We are now right about at high tide. We're about 5 minutes away from high tide here in Naples. We also have winds reported, gusts up to about 112 miles an hour, so it's gotten a bit more serious. But the underlying issue is still the same, and that is that there's no delineation anymore between the Gulf of Mexico and Naples. This was a motorway, a parking lot. Earlier, I showed this to you. There were cars on the left and cars on the right. Now there's just cars pushed back and on the middle. As that surge pushes in, as Randy's showing you, the cars are being pushed further and further into the street, and we're seeing much more debris now. We're seeing much more happening. We're now at probably 5 feet, I would estimate, of surge. We were looking at 4 to 6. Take a look at that white car over there, Randy, on the left. Now almost entirely submerged. There were several cars around it. We're now looking at possibly 8 feet of surge here in Naples, and we're not at the worst of it yet. So there have been warnings about shelter in place. Do not attempt to move. Bill Cairns always reminds us your car can start to float away in 6 inches of water. We're now in about 5 feet of water. But what you're seeing here is the actual surge that you and I talk about so much when we cover these hurricanes. This is actually the Gulf of Mexico surging water into Naples and the surrounding areas. Lester?
A rise in human trafficking, with many victims forced to grow weed that can end up in legal dispensaries. What the Department of Homeland Security defines as a form of modern-day slavery. Jacob Soboroff reports.
An early morning raid in Southern California's Mojave Desert.
Sheriff's Department search warrant!
As deputies from the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department target an urgent problem. Proliferation of black market marijuana farms, not only drawing complaints from locals, but also growing weed illegally and using illegal methods to do it. We followed behind with the lieutenant in charge of the raid.
Who's actually doing the growing at these places? Individuals that have been trafficked here to work off their debt for being smuggled into the country.
So they're being trafficked?
Yes.
As we approached, we see several workers fleeing.
We had several bodies jump over the mound.
Get on the ground! Lay down!
These people that are getting arrested right now, the lieutenant says were the ones that were growing the marijuana, but he also says they themselves might be victims of human trafficking.
Can I ask them a couple questions?
Yep, go at it.
We identified ourselves as journalists, and producer Arnie Hakala, who speaks Mandarin, helped translate.
How did you come here?
They found this job through a website, a Chinese website.
Through a Chinese website. What were you doing for work before this?
They all worked at restaurants before this.
How are you paid? Who's paying you?
They said they haven't actually gotten paid yet.
You haven't been paid?
No.
One of the workers, Fang from Flushing, New York, agreed to show us the trailers where she said she and others had lived for weeks.
She lives here. So she says it's very, as you can see, it's very dirty, it's very messy.
The person or people who brought you here, did they tell you the truth about what you were coming to do?
No, they didn't tell her that. If they told her it would be like this, she wouldn't have come.
The workers tended to over 20 greenhouses on the farm, and deputies say they found over 1,000 pounds of processed marijuana ready for sale.
This product will end up in a dispensary.
In a legal dispensary?
Legal, illegal.
Consumers could show up to a dispensary, buy weed, and it could have potentially been grown by a victim of human trafficking?
Yes. If you look at the number of legalized grow locations for the state, there's not enough of those to funnel product for the legal dispensaries. So over 70 to 80% of marijuana at your dispensary is illegally cultivated.
The lieutenant calculated the value of the cannabis at this grow alone was worth roughly $10 million.
Whoever's running this place is making a fortune, but the people working here say they haven't even made a dime yet.
That's correct.
After being charged with a misdemeanor, the workers were released. And one, Jin, told me none of them had any money. Weeks later, we were contacted by Jin, and we found him living between a friend's car and this motel room in LA. He says he'd been trying for weeks to borrow enough money to make it home to his family in New York. I have no money, Jin said. What hope do I have?
All right, Jacob joined me here. I have to go back here a second. The trafficking victims in your story were charged with misdemeanors. What about the person accused of growing it?
That guy was arrested, Lester, the exact same day at his home in Los Angeles. Out in the suburbs, cops seized nearly 1,000 pounds of illegal pot. But because none of the workers that we met would say that they were trafficked, the deputies could only give them the same type of misdemeanor citations that those workers got. Tomorrow, we're going to take the story beyond this one case. We're going to show you how widespread, Lester, this form of labor trafficking has become and why cops are having such a hard time cracking down on it.
This is a real eye-opener.
A lot of these bikes, you'll notice people have tied white rags to them. There's 2 on the back of this child seat. They are a symbol people hope that Russian forces will see and know that they're not a threat and allow them to get to safety.
If I can, I want to just let you hear what we are hearing
live in real time. We have our translator, Ivan, with us. I was talking to Oksana. She arrived here not long ago from Kharkiv. That is one of the hardest hit areas in eastern Ukraine. Oksana, you were telling us that just a few days ago, you were making a costume for Goran for his school play on March 8th, and now you're here.
Yes, my children were going to kindergarten. They're 6 and 2 years old. They were going to kindergarten. We were preparing for 8th of March. We were living our life. And look at us now.
Fetterman just sat down exclusively with NBC News in his first in-person one-on-one interview since he suffered a stroke in May. Fetterman spoke with NBC's Dasha Burns about his recovery. NBC agreed to closed captioning for the interview because Fetterman says he still struggles with auditory processing, which makes it difficult for him to understand spoken words. Dasha Burns joins us now from Pittsburgh. So Dasha, what did you learn from your conversation?
Hey, Lindsay, just to set up what you're going to see here, you mentioned it in your intro. Closed captioning was used in this interview. So you'll see Fetterman with a screen in front of him. The campaign has been open about his need to use this technology because he's still dealing with some auditory processing symptoms as a result of the stroke. And look, this interview is coming at a critical time, right? We're 1 month out from Election Day, and his lead against his opponent, Dr. Oz, has narrowed in recent weeks. And this is a pivotal race that could determine the balance of power in the Senate.
Everything about it has changed. Basically having a conversation with your wife to having a conversation with your children.
Pennsylvania Democratic Senate candidate John Fetterman explaining how he's coping with the after effects of the stroke he suffered in May, just days before the primary. NBC News agreed to Fetterman's request to use a transcription program during this interview because he's still experiencing auditory processing issues from the stroke, meaning he can't always understand what he's hearing.
Walk me through why we need the closed captioning, how it works.
Yeah, it's really just how things happen because I sometimes will hear things in a way that's not perfectly clear. So I use captioning. So I'm able to see what you're saying in captioning.
Stroke experts say it's not a cognitive issue, and Fetterman says he's still fit to serve if elected.
I always thought I was pretty emphatic. I think I was very, empathetic. That's an example of the stroke, empathetic. I always thought I was very empathetic before having a stroke. But now after having that stroke, I really understand, much more kind of the challenges that Americans have day in and day out.
I mean, when you have moments like you had just now, what's that experience like of just not quite being able to get the words out in the way that you want them to?
No, I don't think it was hard. It was just about having to be thinking more slower to just understand. And sometimes that's kind of the processing that happens.
Aside from releasing a letter from his cardiologist on June 3rd, the campaign has denied requests for his medical records.
Don't voters deserve to know your status now?
As I said, being in front of thousands and thousands of people and having interviews and getting around all across Pennsylvania, that gives everybody and the voters decide, if they think that it's really the issue.
Fetterman's opponent, Trump-endorsed celebrity Dr. Mehmet Oz, has called his health into question.
John Fetterman is either healthy, and he's dodging the debates because he does not want to answer for his radical left positions, or he's too sick.
But Fetterman hoping it's another health issue that will turn voters out in his favor.
Dr. Oz likes to make fun of me that I might miss a word, but he's missed 2 words, and that is a yes or no on the national abortion ban.
While Oz is focusing on crime, hitting Fetterman on his record as head of Pennsylvania's Board of Pardons, where he advocated for the early release of some convicted murderers.
For voters who say, I'd rather prioritize the safety of me and of my kids in and around Philadelphia than prioritizing clemency or lower sentences for criminals, what do you say to those voters?
Well, I actually have a record in fighting crime. As mayor of Braddock here during 4 terms.
From the nation's capital and from just down the road from the U.S. Capitol, I'm Steve Kornacki, and we are now 8 days away and counting from the midterm election that will decide who controls that building right behind me.
A race characterization change that we just had. North Carolina Senate just moved from too early to call between Sherry Beasley and Ted Budd to now being too close to call. Can you give us any insight into why there was that change?
Yeah, let's take a look now at the lay of the land in North Carolina, because you see Ted Budd is leading in the statewide tally right now, a margin of about 112,000 votes right there.